Garry's Mod, a game I'm sure anyone on the internet has at the very least some semblance of awareness over. In the horror sphere, it's become a horror mainstay, with it having spawned such great horror series like Gunslinger Pro 2009, Bad Water Videos 2009, and a seemingly endless swarm of horror mods and content the player base has been enjoying and milking for content for ages now. For me, it's a game I've played the most out of literally everything in my life. Out of every game, in fact. And was quite literally the first game I ever purchased on Steam. Period. And that brings us to today's video topic. The, in my opinion, current best Gmod horror game that you can actually play. Well, not within Gmod at least. Now, this isn't a horror mod, but instead an actual horror game called Wheres Garry, made by one The Realist Billy. Originally, I didn't plan making a video on this because they stated it was a game they made literally for their own video on a whim, which I was massively impressed by. And after giving it a play, I really couldn't help but give it some love by making a video on it, which is why you're watching this now. It also helps that I didn't get a video out last week for reasons I'd rather not get into. Nonetheless, I'm sure you'll all quite enjoy the video I have in store for you today. But with that, on to my short intro. Hello everybody, it's me, Dregobob. Welcome to Wheres Garry, a Gmod horror game that I'll get into explaining in just a little bit. I'm pleased to say we've hit our goal for 15k subs before my birthday this coming March, way out of the park. I want to thank all of you for helping me to get this far, as well as all of the creators of the things I've covered for having made the things that enabled me to do this. And that's why we're making a stretch goal. If we can hit 18 or even 20k before my birthday this March, I'll try and put something special together. I'm not currently sure of what exactly, but I always think of something. I'd also like to once again promote my Discord server, a place for creators, big or small, and really anyone to find a community. Right now, we have an art competition with the first prize of Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion to promote the upcoming video on the game itself. Not to mention posts in my Discord server and on my channel dedicated to your art. And the second prize also comes with a cool free month of Discord Nitro, courtesy of one of our server moderators. On screen right now, you should also be seeing art from the folks on my Discord server, plus the creator of the day, which could be a random artist, someone with their own channel dedicated to their series via my creators program, or something else. With that, let's move on to a look at the Realist Billy's channel. They too are a fellow creator, only they make some pretty good games on top of some pretty grand content. So I do highly recommend going and giving them some love too before watching my video and insane theories about what's going on inside of Wheres Garry. Speaking of, the real magic happens within their Game Jolt page, where the Realist Billy's games lurk. Currently, he has 3 games: Herb Fortress, Inside Black Mesa, a FNAF-like, and today's video topic, Wheres Garry. Before we go into the games page on Game Jolt, I'd like to also extend another thanks to them, as I managed to get into contact with them, and they were kind enough to provide me with various assets from the game to use in this video. So another massive thanks to them. Back to the Game Jolt page, just going off the imagery we see here, there's most certainly something amiss. I mean, there is also the thumbnail and the title of the video, which should have hopefully drawn you here in the first place, so you get the gist. Something is wrong with this version of Garry's mod, and it has something to do with Gary Newman himself, going off of the name alone. So let's read what the story section of this page has to say about the game before we ultimately jump in. You love playing Garry's mod. One day, you decided you wanted to get every achievement for the game, and you managed to do so. Except for one. Yes, I am the real Garry. An achievement you get only by being in a multiplayer server with the game's creator, Gary Newman. And speaking of which, he's inside of a server right now. But something is off. You managed to enter, but he's already gone, and you can't leave. To make matters worse, the server is filled with missing textures, error models, and monsters. Quite the setup. For those of you that didn't know previously, yes, I Am the Real Gary is a massively rare achievement. In fact, I believe you can't even really get the thing anymore since Gary Newman supposedly doesn't play his namesake game anymore, meaning the situation the player character of this game is in is quite the prize. However, as we've seen and just read, something is seriously wrong with Gary's mod. We're not trapped in the Gary's mod server, Gary Newman just left, and there are things, monsters lurking about, along with missing textures and the ever accursed error models. And that brings us to the very first level of the game, Sandbox 101, set on the map GM Flatgrass. Though, interestingly, there's a time and objects counter that isn't quite like what you'd find in a regular Gary's mod server browser, and we'll find out exactly why when we ultimately get in game. Upon loading in, we're met with something rather strange. A tutorial, courtesy of a fellow named Ketchup Fan 2. I originally planned on doing a whole voiceover bit here, but the text comes a bit too quick for me to do it in a way that feels nice and neat to my ADHD-riddled brain. But what's most important is that Ketchup Fan 2 is in the same boat as us. There's someone trying to go and meet the creator so they can get the coveted achievement themselves. What's more notable is that Ketchup Fan's model is that of an A-posing climber, meaning this takes place more towards the early days of Gmod, where players with that model were common. Back to what they're saying, we apparently missed Gary, and both of us are now understandably confused about the state of the server. The sky is pitch black, the map is modified, and an utter mess. Plus, we are apparently the only player that Ketchup Fan has seen in his search. Period. According to them, every server Gary joins lands up exactly like this, stripped bare to the bones. And we can't leave the server now unless we fix what Gary broke. Since this level serves as more or less a tutorial, we're shown the goal and thing we must do in order to reach the exit. We have to do a bit of cleanup using a patch function our tool gun has. On top of this, it also possesses a scan function that reveals hidden errors, and later, it will have an even more important function. It's after this, we learn that when Gary leaves the server, in his wake he leaves monsters that are like players, but not quite. They chase and hunt regular players, and Ketchup Fan was far too terrified to see what exactly happens when they are caught. So they hid, taking advantage of their FOV. And here they teach us how to do exactly that. With them acting like one of these monsters in place of a real one, we hide from them twice. Though the interior of the building we hide in, as well as some of the places outside, are scribbled on with graffiti. While following them once more, we also learn that noises, even something as small as leaves crunching underfoot or the rustling of tall grass, can alert the monsters from across the map. Before we're able to actually escape the server, we're introduced to a final sound-producing object. A server, one we simply step into to activate. Though it's terribly loud, and there are going to be quite a few of these throughout the game. The kicker comes from the fact that there are multiple doors we need to try before finally being able to leave the server. While Ketchup Fan 2 would come with us, there's something they need to stay behind and do. And after we ultimately leave the server, we're given the ability to enter the next. One titled Construct Fun, set on, of course, GM_construct. Though in this one, we have less time and even more broken objects to find and clean up. Loading in, it is indeed Construct, but much like the previous level, it's a sort of remix. Not too dissimilar to your average workshop map, the walls are spattered with graffiti, not to mention an exorbitant amount of that internal red fluid we humans carry. In all levels, things are initiated by patching a single error that causes all of the other missing textures, errors, and servers to pop up. But this also triggers the monsters lurking within these levels to join and begin patrolling about. Unlike the first level, there's a load more objects we have to patch, and they're scattered all around the level. While you would think this is no big deal, the addition of the monster makes it a very, very big deal. Sounds you make, like stepping on leaves, garbage, or walking through shrubs, will alert them. Not only this, but activating servers, which is something that you need to do, are also something that alert the monster. The issue here is that so much of the objective is out in the open that it becomes a death sentence unless you know where the monster is at all times, or can find a proper place to hide right away. And I mean right away. In this original 1.0 version of the game, the monster of this level is incredibly aggressive, and it's more than likely that once they lock onto you, you're absolutely doomed. This issue is magnified by the timer, where if that runs out, you lose instantly. But where are my manners? I've spent so long talking about the monster in this level, and yet I've outright failed to tell you anything about them. The monster in this level is called the Minge Bag. Minge Bag being a term for new players of Gmod back in the day. They simply patrol the map, spouting corrupt Kleiner voice lines as they do so. Of the monsters, they are the most basic, though their mangled Kleiner model spliced with a Half-Life 2 zombie is quite unnerving. And don't even get me started on its, thingy. That being the gravity gun sticking out of its stomach. With that, it takes a fair bit to finally find and patch all the errors and missing textures within the level. It's even more of a trek having to try each door in hopes of finding the one that will allow you to exit the server, all while being pursued by the Minge Bag. But after finally escaping, this brings us to the next level in the game. Big City RP. Set in the map, of course, GM Big City. Unlike the last one, we have more time, and just 3 more objects to collect. Unlike the last level, however, we have 2 threats to deal with in the city, both being quite a bit different to one another. But before we talk about them, this level, much like the previous, is a more nightmarish remix of the original. I didn't say prior, but it almost feels like an earlier version of the game. Though all of this is likely due to whatever Gary did by joining or just leaving the server. Another big question is if Gary is doing this purposefully or accidentally. But really, who am I kidding? Horrifying player-like constructs that are essentially more advanced NPCs masquerading as monstrous players? Stripping the real players of all abilities beyond the 2 things they need to even escape? This is all some kind of game crafted for us by Gary, but the question is, why? That's one we'll be asking for a long time. But in the meantime, let's look at this stage's monsters. The most prevalent of the pair is one simply called Meaty. A corrupt and frankly disgusting looking Half-Life 2 fast zombie that's remarkably more meaty than normal. Unlike the previous beast we dealt with, this monster is sound-based. Situated around the map are various stoplights, and even more sound-producing objects than the previous map. Triggering the stoplights or any of these sound-producing objects will send them running to your location at breakneck speeds you couldn't hope to escape from. Fortunately, they're completely blind, meaning if you stand still, even if they're right beside you, they'll simply walk away after a time. You'd think this would be easy, however, the other entity they're paired with makes this complicated. This entity is named Semper, an invisible enemy that doesn't register on your scanner tool when pinged. I also believe this particular character's model is an unused or unfinished model of Gordon Freeman from the original Half-Life. This creepy stalker roams through the map invisibly, a loud static screech being the only thing the player can really use to identify where they are besides their shadow. Unlike other monsters, they simply watch, and if given enough time will let out a loud, corrupted screech as they chase you at a rather manageable pace. Alone, it isn't very dangerous, though the real danger comes from you as the player having to more or less always stay moving to avoid them, while also taking care not to make any loud noises that might alert Meaty to your location. Unlike the previous arguably harder level, this one requires much more strategizing and quick thinking. The placement of many things you need to patch being nearby these stoplights mean timing is everything. Triggering one while Semper is nearby is a death sentence, since you're unable to run away when Meaty is near. His speed alone meaning once he's on you, it's over. By far, this level has to be my favorite, and is of course one we eventually complete, leading us to the second to last level of the game, Ragdoll Torture, set in the map GM_Slaughter, a slight renaming of the map I'm sure most Gmod players know of. Unlike the previous level, this one has far more items, and slightly less time. How fair. This level is again a sort of remix of another, taking elements of the previous two and kinda mashing them together. Unlike the previous two, this one has various hazards, ranging from saw blades running in the floor similar to that 1TF2 map, and a trolley armed with a buzzsaw situated on a track going back and forth, plus the most dastardly of all, a tripwire connected to a little bell that alerts the big bad of this level, the headsman. A masked and thoroughly corrupted Nick Left 4 Dead model wielding an improvised saw made from a fizz gun and saw blade. They're more basic compared to the previous two, wandering the map much like the minge bag from the first level. Though unlike them, they're arguably more easy to contend with when paired with the abundant hiding spaces. Where they really get you is the sheer abundance of things that need to be patched, forcing you into a game of how fast can I go without having the headsman catch me? A rather famous game from Scotland. Despite all of this, there isn't much else to say about the map or the headsman himself, though I do quite like the design of his weapon. And exiting the server brings us to the final level of the game. A server set in GM_graveyard. This level has both the lowest time limit and object count, but don't go thinking this will be any easier than the previous levels. We meet Gary, the one behind all of this madness. They take on the form of a glowing white G-man with pitch-black eyes. Unlike all of the previous monsters, they have the innate ability to freeze time within the game itself, stopping us completely in our tracks, while they are free to move as they please. Not only that, but they'll teleport in order to get closer if we get too far away. And apparently, Gary was expecting us, with him asking if it was all worth it. And after having come this far, we really have no choice but to get that achievement now. All that's left to do is to find the 30 errors hidden in the map before patching them. Unlike all of the previous levels, Gary knows exactly where we are at all times. In the text chat, they tend to taunt us and even tell us exactly when they plan to freeze time so we can at the very least try and get away as far as possible. Much like GM_Big City, you must constantly be on the move. But at the same time, you have to remain just close enough for them to both not be able to get to you when time freezes and to stop them from teleporting closer. I've had many a runs ended one too many times by doing just that. As what's essentially a final boss for this game, it certainly does an excellent job. And this is something I've seldom seen any horror games or series I've covered in the past do. I find the idea of being utterly helpless as this thing that's about to end you casually walking towards you to do just that incredibly funny and horrifying at the same time. Like always, after a lot of trial and error, not to mention frustration after dying roughly 20 times to a white G-man, we finally patch every error. Lucky us that G-man promises not to teleport anymore once we reach one door. Though, ominously, he states multiple times that we'll end up just like the others. The others? Other people who attempted to get the "Yes, I'm the real Gary" achievement like we just did? Or the people who were in the servers he entered and left? Well, lucky for us, it seems we really don't have to wait to find out who these others are, as while I was writing this script, I got to speak to the realist Billy, who informed me himself that this update released. And now, upon loading into the main menu, we also see a thank you note from the realist Billy. I'm not reading what it says, so you'll have to play the game for yourself. Now that we're here, clicking on the first level once more, the tutorial level, we're met with Ketchup Fan 2. But we learn something terrible. Ketchup Fan 2 was never real, or was at a point once real. But now, because of Gary, he's been reduced to something meant to serve a single purpose before fading away forever. That's why he ultimately decided to stay behind, and even more, knew all too well how exactly to fix the thing keeping us within the server he was trapped in. The thing keeping us from ultimately meeting Gary to play this little game he made for us. After all, Gary explicitly says this is a game he made for the two of us. But now back here, we're facing one of Gary's loose ends, an NPC that served its purpose and is now little more than a null. Something the server, that Gary, wants gone. But Ketchup Fan won't let that happen so easy. If we leave the server, he will cease to exist, and so begins the true final level. Ketchup Fan 2, or Null himself, closely resembles the Minge Bag. Only, unlike them, they're still partially normal. His right arm breaking out of place in the same way the Minge Bag's arms were. Perhaps this means that every monster we've come across is a Null that took on a life of its own, albeit a broken and desolate one, filled with hatred or even jealousy of the thing they were modeled to be like before being booted out once their purpose was served. I can easily imagine countless people like us hoping to get that coveted achievement, meeting their own Ketchup Fan 2 before beginning their journey. One thing to note is that Gary doesn't just grab the player. They phase over the UI and seemingly attack the real person beyond the screen. Perhaps these nulls, the monsters, are all ghosts in the machine that lost Gary's game. It would make sense. We are told we'd end up like the others, and it's not hard to believe these others are the ones that didn't make the cut. That, as I said, failed Gary's game. Perhaps Ketchup Fan only persisted after we left because he was so fresh, because he still had a purpose. A more disturbing theory is that we're wiping them away once we leave the server, as in we're slowly but surely degrading their digitized being. And that's the only reason the monsters are actually so aggressive towards us. The longer they keep us in the server with them, or the longer they prevent players from making it through, the longer they can exist. The longer they can hold on to their fleeting consciousness. It's likely they aren't even as insane as we think too, as sadly, when we inevitably succeed in our goal of escaping the server, Null speaks, stating they just want to have freedom. Maybe the reason the others don't speak to us is because of how broken and degraded their digitized being is. They're more or less insane now. But it's after returning to the level select, we find this new secret level to have the name Freedom. A cruel joke that speaks to the fact the only real freedom they'll ever have lies within a limited simulation within a game. If that's even all they are. As I said prior, there's a very good chance these nulls are the remnants of people that failed Gary's game. But that's all we can really say. With no further material, and no more fuel for my insane theorization fire, that concludes this game. Now, one thing I want to say is, this game is very obviously inspired by the game Capture the Intelligence, a game I, and even Realist Billy, have covered in the past. And I really like that. It takes the 2D top-down nature of the game and tosses it on its head without making it feel like a cheap knockoff. In fact, I'd say this is even as good, or even better than Capture the Intelligence in some areas. And both this game and the other one, I really do love. I have to say again, a massive thanks to Realist Billy for the asset help and information on the update. Without them, I wouldn't have covered the last bit of information on the game. If possible, I'll definitely see if he and I can do some kind of collab in the future. But for now, on screen should be art from some of the wonderful folks on my server. Hopefully, at the time of posting this video, the art competition I spoke about should still be going on. The prize is a copy of Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion, and the second prize is a month of Discord Nitro. If things like that interest you, do join. But even if that's not the case, still, give it a try. We host the occasional game night, watch night, and more. We're also slowly but surely becoming super duper active, which is something I've always wanted for the server. Which is really, really awesome to me. I'm Dregobob, hoping you're having a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Bye bye!